Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra.
Welcome to this Wednesday edition of Market Mantra, the program in which we give you a complete update on the economic, business and stock market news of the day. My name is V. Ravi Kumar and with me is my co-anchor in Hindi, Vishal Sharma.
नमस्कार, मार्केट मंत्र में आप सभी का स्वागत। प्रतिदिन की तरह आज भी हम आप तक आर्थिक, व्यापारिक और शेयर बाजार से जुड़े ताजा समाचार लाएंगे, साथ ही उन पर चर्चा भी करेंगे। कार्यक्रम में चर्चा के लिए आज आमंत्रित हैं बिजनेस स्टैंडर्ड के एडिटोरियल डायरेक्टर ए.के. भट्टाचार्य जी, नमस्कार। कार्यक्रम में आपका स्वागत।
नमस्कार।
और सबसे पहले हेडलाइंस के साथ रवि।
The stories that we are tracking in this edition of Market Mantra: equity benchmarks climb for the 10th consecutive session even as the global cues were negative. Wholesale inflation hit a 7-month high of 1.32% in September, mainly due to rise in food prices. And global stocks slip amid halted COVID-19 vaccine trials and an impasse on U.S. stimulus negotiations.
कमजोर वैश्विक संकेतों के बावजूद प्रमुख शेयर सूचकांकों में लगातार 10वें कारोबारी सत्र में बढ़त दर्ज। खाद्य वस्तुओं, विशेषकर सब्जियों की कीमतें बढ़ने से सितंबर माह में थोक मूल्यों पर आधारित मुद्रास्फीति बढ़कर 7 महीने के उच्च स्तर 1.32% पर पहुंची और कोविड-19 वैक्सीन के परीक्षण बीच में रोके जाने और अमेरिकी प्रोत्साहन पैकेज पर गतिरोध से वैश्विक शेयर बाजारों में गिरावट। शुरुआत पहली खबर से। प्रमुख शेयर सूचकांकों में आज लगातार 10वें कारोबारी सत्र में बढ़त दर्ज हुई। सत्र की समाप्ति से पहले बैंकिंग और वित्तीय शेयरों में तेजी ने आईटी शेयरों में हुई बिकवाली की भरपाई कर दी। कमजोर शुरुआत के बाद सत्र के अंतिम घंटों में बढ़त हासिल करके बॉम्बे स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का सेंसेक्स 0.42% बढ़कर 169 अंक की वृद्धि से 40,795 पर बंद हुआ। इसी तरह नेशनल स्टॉक एक्सचेंज 0.31% की वृद्धि से 37 अंक ऊपर 11,971 पर पहुंच गया। वहीं दूसरी तरफ बीएसई मिड कैप इंडेक्स में 0.5% की बढ़त दर्ज हुई, जबकि स्मॉल कैप इंडेक्स 0.19% नुकसान में रहा।
Equity indices today defied gravity for the 10th session on the trot. The key domestic stocks gained as a fag-end rally in banking and financial counters helped offset profit booking in IT stocks. The 30-share BSE Sensex opened on a weak note but gained ground in the last hour of trade to finish at 40,795, up 169 points or 0.42%. Similarly, the broader NSE Nifty rose 37 points or 0.31% to 11,971. On the other hand, the broader market at the BSE, the mid and small caps closed divergently. The BSE Mid Cap Index gained 0.5% and the BSE Small Cap Index fell 0.19%. Bajaj Finserv led the Sensex gainers chart, spurting 3.9%, followed by Bajaj Finance, ICICI Bank, IndusInd Bank, SBI, Tata Steel, Axis Bank, L&T and HDFC. On the other hand, NTPC, ONGC, Power Grid, Tech Mahindra, Infosys, ITC and HCL Tech were among the major laggards, dropping by up to 4.4%. BSE Finance, BankX, Realty, Capital Goods and Basic Materials indices rose by up to 1.68%, while utilities, power, IT, tech, oil and gas, healthcare and auto closed lower. Announcing its results post-market hours, Infosys said its consolidated net profit grew by 20.5% to 4,845 crore rupees for the September quarter, while it has raised revenue forecast to 2 to 3% for the financial year 2021. AKB,
Yeah.
This is the 10th session on the trot where the indices have moved upwards. How do you see the movement? Is there profit taking right around the corner? Logically, that would seem so. But on the probably looking at a slightly longer term month, where do you see the market? Because the market seem to have completely almost recovered from the levels that they dropped rather sharply
not
from?
fully recovered as yet. It is still to scale maybe 1,000 points more and from the Sensex point of view. But what is happening right now, from my understanding, is that it is an expectations-based rally that is happening. The markets have reached this point and they are staying on and holding on to this position. And largely these expectations fueled by the Q2 results of India Inc. that are going to get rolled out in the coming few weeks. You have got an early indication of Infosys results, and there are many other companies. The expectations are that the Q2 results of India Inc. will actually show a smart recovery, not only compared to Q1, but also compared to what they fared in the Q2 of the last financial year. So I attribute this current strength in the market purely on the expectations that the market have on the India Inc.'s performance, and largely the absence of generally bad news, and also the government may have quietly worked in providing hope that a stimulus may not be far off.
But broadly, there has been a discussion which has kind of grown. It had been there even prior to the COVID AKB. That was the discussion about markets reflecting the real underlying economy. In fact, I might remember that the famous Nobel laureate Paul Samuelson had once quipped that the market had predicted 9 out of the past 5 recessions. So this discussion has not been there only for the last 6-7 months. It's been longer than that. That the markets might not be reflecting the real underlying economy. What would be your take on that? How disconnected are the stock markets from the underlying economy?
Well, markets have clearly still now have run ahead of the economic recovery trend, I would say. And markets were not proved wrong, because what we do see in Q2 from September onwards, there are clear signs of economic activity coming back. Not to its pre-COVID levels, but certainly to 70 to 80% levels of what they prevailed. Uncertainties still remain. How long will the actual recovery be maintained, and what will be the trajectory of that recovery? You saw the International Monetary Fund projection that the full current year's economic growth will actually contract by 10%, 10+%. Even the Reserve Bank of India's overall approach is that economy will contract by 9.5%. But I think the markets have run little ahead of these economic recovery, which is largely will be a statistical recovery. It will not be a recovery, real recovery, because for real recovery will take place probably, in my view, only from the middle of next year.
And often you have said on the program AKB that when we ask you to look ahead for the next 3 months, what are those factors, global as well as domestic, which could have a great effect on the Indian markets? And you mentioned one of them is the event which is likely to happen in US on November 3rd.
That's right.
And do you see any other event coming up the horizon?
I think 2 more, one international, apart from the US elections. We have to see how the Brexit plays out. That is supposed to play out by the end of this calendar year. What impact it actually has on the European economy, and therefore the Indian market, the responses will be determining that. And the second factor, which is a domestic factor, is at what point does the government think it is appropriate to come up with a solid stimulus in terms of either a tax cut or fresh infusion of capital into the economy to step up the pace of economic activity, particularly in the infrastructure sector.
You refer to stimulus, that the government is probably keeping the powder dry to probably bring in stimulus when the mood starts changing. That's been the thing that we have been hearing from various sources in the government. Do you think the mood, because we've been putting out a lot of statistics on Market Mantra over the last few weeks, things seem to be moving towards the green territory. Do you think the mood is changing, and is this the time for the government to come out with a bazooka?
I think the mood is changing, but the recovery seems to be patchy in various sectors. Before it actually becomes sustainable and grows roots, and I think it will be an appropriate time for the government to step in. There is some room within the government finances, in my assessment, to come up with those either through tax cuts or through expenditure outlays. So if you want me to say when, probably maybe before the end of winter, maybe December or January, one can expect more announcements to come from the government side, either by way of tax rationalization measures or investment outlays.
You mentioned December. I was reading the research report of an international analyst who said that there's a lot of pent-up demand because of the lockdown in the Indian economy, and that effect of growth because of a pent-up demand will start tapering off post-November. So I hear you saying the same thing, that
absolutely
after November, that would be the right time to bring
absolutely,
your
and also a lot of clarity will emerge after the US elections.
All right. And quickly for our investors who probably, because a lot of analysts give this recommendation that keep accumulating stocks while this volatility is on, would you recommend because now earlier for a long while when we used to do Market Mantra, all the indices will move up the same way, large cap, small cap, mid cap, but now that doesn't happen. Now you even see variation between mid cap and small cap. So
well, I think the markets will continue to remain volatile for some time, in my view, and divergence in the markets movement in different categories will continue, and that itself will show that how the markets will remain volatile. What has happened today is very interesting, where the small cap has actually moved down, whereas the mid cap has moved up. Probably this is a function of the SEBI decision on the multi-cap funds rationalization of the investment portfolios. So, which is what is playing out on the small cap index as well as the mid cap index.
But that should probably give a fillip to the small cap, because a lot of multi-caps are very low weightage on small caps, almost 5-6%.
And if you notice, small cap index went up sharply, and then after the SEBI relaxation and the SEBI's assurance that those norms will be implemented in a manner that there is no sudden jerk or sudden there is no sharp movement. So I think there is the reconsideration that is taking place within the SEBI as well as the market thing on how the multi-cap norms will be implemented from April 2021.
So hopefully they'll come out with a flexi cap category. But AKB, if a person listening to Market Mantra right now has only 1,000, 2,000 rupees a month to put in an SIP, would you recommend that he goes large cap or mid cap or small cap?
I think it will be safer to go in for large cap because the companies in the large cap have greater resilience to withstand whatever the swings in the markets that take place. And also, if you look at the Q2 results, all the companies, whether they are in the auto sector or they are in the IT sector or in the healthcare sector, if you identify some of those sectors, the pharma sector, I think these are the sectors that we need to be very, very closely watching, and these are the sectors that are likely to bring more. And there's some juice left, as the market people say, because the auto sector is seeing the benefits of the shift towards personalized transport. It has already begun in the passenger car segment. We have already seen it in the two-wheeler segment. And as you can see that the country's largest producer of passenger cars is actually thinking in terms of more models, and almost every month there will be new models. So clearly the automotive sector, the pharma sector, the healthcare sector, the IT sector, they are looking at it
with a lot of expectation. The sectors that you need to be careful about are obviously in the hospitality sector, because suddenly you are seeing that the hospitality sector is not doing, or the aviation or the transportation sector. So once the vaccine is out and the risk aversion mentality is by and large goes away after the vaccine, I would imagine the other sectors like the hospitality and the transportation sector, they will pick up. One can look forward to that.
जी, और अब रुपए के प्रदर्शन पर नजर डाल लेते हैं। रुपया आज 4 पैसे मजबूत होकर $1 के मुकाबले 73 रुपए 31 पैसे पर बंद हुआ। अंतरबैंक विदेशी मुद्रा बाजार में रुपए में कारोबार सीमित दायरे में रहा। विशेषज्ञों के अनुसार कारोबारियों को अभी भी अमेरिकी प्रोत्साहन पैकेज की उम्मीद बंधी हुई है। इस बीच दुनिया की 6 प्रमुख मुद्राओं की तुलना में डॉलर की स्थिति दर्शाने वाला डॉलर इंडेक्स 0.02% गिरकर 93.50 पर पहुंच गया।
AKB, quickly, is rupee at the right level right now? Because a lot of people still recommend that it should probably go down to something like 80. Do you recommend that, or do you think?
I think no level is right in the exchange market, really, foreign exchange market. I think what you are seeing at this point in time is the weakening in the demand for dollar in the Indian economy, thanks to lower oil prices, and also thanks to lower imports. Imports continue to contract at a double-digit level every month for the last 7 or 8 months, and exports fortunately have picked up. So what you are seeing right now is a kind of a twin pressure, upward pressure on the value of rupee by reduced demand for dollar, both on account of lower oil prices as well as lower demand for imports.
Let's look at another piece of data that we track very closely, that's inflation. Spiraling prices of food items, especially vegetables, pushed up the wholesale inflation to a 7-month high of 1.32% in September. According to government data released today, the annual rate of inflation based on the monthly wholesale price index, WPI, stood at 1.32% for the month of September 2020 as compared to 0.33% during the corresponding month of the previous year. Inflation in food articles during September was at 8.17% as against 3.84% in August. Commerce and Industry Ministry data showed before recording an increase of 0.16% in August this year, the WPI inflation was in the negative territory for 4 straight months. The WPI-based inflation appears to be moving in sync with CPI-based retail inflation, which shot up to an 8-month high of 7.34% in September, mainly on account of rising prices of food items. AKB, the RBI had a target of maintaining the inflation at 4% with a plus minus 2% range, and that's clearly been breached for quite a few months now. And initially, the Monetary Policy Committee called this inflation a transient hump. Would you still consider this a transient hump?
Yes, I entirely agree with you that I think it is a transient hump. RBI itself has noted that its own surveys show that the consumer price are likely to see a tapering off, going down once the winter months set in. So I don't see that the retail inflation, the consumer price index, to stay at this elevated level. Please remember, as you also pointed out, that the consumer price index is retaining this high level largely because of food prices, and now this has been reflected a little bit on the WPI also, wholesale price index also. The wholesale price index is also has moved up because of the food prices. So I think what we are seeing is in both in the consumer price as well as in the wholesale price, there is some sort of a convergence happening, and this convergence actually telling us two clear things. Number one is that if both WPI as well as the retail price, the food prices go up, then hopefully it's the transmission of higher prices, the benefits of that should go down to the producer of food items. So if that happens, in my view, the demand generation in the rural economy would be easier to achieve. and that is a good sign. And the second point that we must not ignore is that when WPI starts moving up from 0.33 to 1.34, then we must realize that wholesale price being a producer price, so therefore there is some sort of a demand and production activities are picking up, which is why the WPI is going up. Whenever there is a uptick in the wholesale price index of this nature, there is a clear indication that there is demand for goods at the wholesale level, which is actually a producer demand, which means factories, manufacturers, service providers, they are looking out for more of items, raw materials and suppliers for the items, and they go into the wholesale market. And if the prices go up, it's a clear sign that economic activities are probably going up in a rather sustained way.
जी भट्टाचार्य जी, थोक महंगाई दर बढ़ने के आंकड़े सामने आए हैं और इससे पहले जो आप रिटेल इन्फ्लेशन की बात कर रहे थे, खुदरा महंगाई दर भी बढ़ी सितंबर माह में, तो इससे क्या आपको लगता है कि आने वाले समय में रिजर्व बैंक के लिए ब्याज दरें घटाकर ग्रोथ को बूस्ट देने की कोशिशें और मुश्किल हो सकती हैं उसके लिए?
देखिए, जो आपने कहा एकदम सही कहा आपने। रिजर्व बैंक ऑफ इंडिया को इस बार भी जो मौद्रिक नीति की समीक्षा उन्होंने की इस अक्टूबर के 2-3 दिन पहले जो की उन्होंने, उसमें भी यही एक बहुत बड़ा उनमें एक डिलेमा कह सकते हैं आप उसको, कि वो क्या एकोमोडेटिव स्टांस रखें या इंटरेस्ट रेट को घटाएं या बढ़ाएं। क्योंकि अगर आप एक ट्रेडिशनल कन्वेंशनल अगर अप्रोच देखेंगे, उसमें अगर इस वक्त अगर आप जो खुदरा मूल्य की जो गति देख रहे हैं, वो तो इस वक्त 7-7.5% के ऊपर है। तो ये जो आरबीआई का जो मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी टारगेट है, वो जो ऊपर का जो सीलिंग है 6%, उससे ज्यादा है। तो ट्रेडिशनली अगर देखें, आरबीआई को करना चाहिए था कि वो रेट को बढ़ा दे, पर उन्होंने रेट को इसलिए नहीं बढ़ाया है क्योंकि उन्होंने ये देख लिया कि ये जो खुदरा मूल्य की जो स्थिति जो है, ये सामयिक है और ये दिसंबर के बाद शायद नीचे आ जाएगा, क्योंकि सप्लाई बढ़ रही है। जो सप्लाई डिस्ट्रप्शन हुई थी लॉकडाउन के वजह, उसी के लिए ये खुदरा जो मूल्य में बढ़ोतरी आई है। और दूसरा बात यह है कि उन्होंने ये देखा कि इस वक्त ग्रोथ वृद्धि को बढ़ावा देना बहुत ज्यादा जरूरी है, बल्कि कि इन्फ्लेशन के ऊपर रोक थामना, इसीलिए उन्होंने एकोमोडेटिव स्टांस किया। मैं ये नहीं समझता कि अगर खुदरा मूल्य या थोक मूल्य में थोड़ी बहुत ज्यादा अगर ऊंचाई दिखती है, इस वक्त रिजर्व बैंक ऑफ इंडिया उतनी चिंतित होगी जितनी वो पहले होगी जब उनके पास ग्रोथ तो था पर दाम बढ़ाना नहीं चाहते थे।
Interestingly, you mentioned that the rise in prices, especially of vegetables and food, would probably go down to the producers when you look at the wholesale price index. But if you look at the core inflation, that is, you leave out food and fuel, you'll see that it's either remained the same or even probably weakened a bit. Does that show weak demand still in the economy?
Well, there is the data is reflecting a period when demand is not yet come back to its pre-COVID levels. In many sectors, demand is at around 60 to 70% of its earlier levels. But the trajectory is very clear that with every passing month, the demand is recovering. The problem is actually what you are seeing is on the supply side, where providing supplies to the manufacturing and the service providing sector is becoming a bigger challenge. Getting workers back to the factories and back to the service providing units is becoming a problem. So once those issues are tackled, I can look at a scenario in which that the growth as well as the inflation, the perspective will get better for the Indian economy.
और अब रुक कर लेते हैं एशियाई बाजारों का। तो आज अधिकतर एशियाई बाजारों में गिरावट देखी गई। कोविड-19 वैक्सीन के परीक्षण बीच में रोके जाने और अमेरिकी प्रोत्साहन पर बातचीत में गतिरोध से बाजार में जोखिम की धारणा को बल मिला। दक्षिण कोरिया का कोस्पी 0.9% लुढ़क गया। चीन के शंघाई कंपोजिट इंडेक्स में 0.6% की गिरावट रही, जबकि सिंगापुर के स्ट्रेट टाइम्स में 0.5% की बढ़त दर्ज हुई। जापान का निकेई और हांगकांग के हैंगसेंग में कारोबार सीमित दायरे में रहा और दोनों सूचकांक 0.1% की मामूली बढ़त के साथ बंद हुए। यूरोपीय शेयर बाजारों में भी आज गिरावट रही। सीमित दायरे में कारोबार करते हुए लंदन का FTSE 100, फ्रांस का कैक और जर्मनी का डेक्स 0.2% तक के नुकसान में रहे।
Let's look at the U.S. market. Wall Street snapped a 4-day winning streak yesterday. The three major U.S. indices logged losses with a halted COVID-19 vaccine trial and an elusive U.S. stimulus agreement weighing on sentiment as the third quarter earnings season kicked off. Johnson & Johnson announced on Monday that it was pausing clinical trials of a COVID-19 vaccine candidate due to an unexplained illness in a study participant. The delay weighed on the company's shares even after its good earnings report. Its shares were last off 2.5%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 both declined 0.6%, and the Nasdaq Composite Index slipped marginally by 0.1%. Broadly, if you look at the U.S. markets, almost decadal bull run there. Where do you see the markets going? Of course, the U.S. elections would be a big factor, but where do you broadly see that?
Well, I think the economy, the U.S. economy, is still at its suboptimal levels, and there is a debate going on whether there should be a continuation of the kind of relief measures that have already been given to the American workers, to the employees, and there is a lot of uncertainty with the election results. Which way will it go, and whether it will be a hugely contested election. So there is uncertainty, there is volatility, and there is so I think to expect the U.S. market to be stable at this point in time is asking a bit too much. So expect the volatility to continue till clarity emerges on what kind of a verdict it is and whether the transition of power in the U.S. Remains as smooth as it has been in the past.
Let's look at the oil prices now. Oil prices today edged down under pressure from growing concerns that a recovery in fuel demand will be stalled by soaring coronavirus cases around the world. In intraday trade, Brent crude prices were trading around $42.40 per barrel, while WTI crude prices were around $40.10 per barrel.
और अब बात सोने की कर लेते हैं। दिल्ली सराफा बाजार में सोने के दामों में आज लगातार दूसरे दिन गिरावट आई। रुपए में मजबूती से सोने का भाव 631 रुपए गिरकर 51,367 रुपए प्रति 10 ग्राम पर आ गया। चांदी 1,681 रुपए टूटकर 62,158 रुपए प्रति किलोग्राम के स्तर पर आ गई। अंतर्राष्ट्रीय बाजार में सोना हल्की बढ़त के साथ $1,896 प्रति औंस पर रहा। चांदी $24.16 प्रति औंस पर स्थिर बनी रही।
AKB, gold prices have kind of moved up and then moved down. If somebody is looking at from an asset allocation perspective, what would you recommend for that person? Normally you say 4%, 5% of your total assets should be in gold. Should one increase the allocation, decrease? How would you say?
Well, quickly? I think the time for increasing the allocation is gone by because the kind of the bull run that the gold saw when at the start of this year, I think that was the time when if one had to rejig one's portfolios allocations in favor of gold, but to do it now would probably be a little imprudent because there is correction taking place at this point in time, and if the economy picks up in the coming 6 months or 8 months, there will be more interest in the stock market rather than in the commodities segment.
Right.
और कार्यक्रम का अब समय हो रहा है। भट्टाचार्य जी, कार्यक्रम में आप शामिल हुए और चर्चा की इतने सारी बातों पर, इतने सारे मुद्दों पर, इसके लिए आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
नमस्कार।
Thank you, AKB. Before we close, a reminder of the headlines that we covered in this edition of Market Mantra. Equity benchmarks climbed for the 10th consecutive session even as the global cues were negative. Wholesale inflation hit a 7-month high of 1.32% in September, mainly due to rise in food prices. And global stocks slipped amid halted COVID-19 vaccine trials and an impasse on US stimulus negotiations. That's all that we have in this edition of Market Mantra. Namaskar.
Market Mantra.